Can the youngsters of the Bassmaster Elite Series catch them without tech? Cody Huff's rise to fame and his third place finish, that and more on Inside Bassmaster Podcast, episode 170. I'm your host, as usual, Ronnie Moore. My co-host, like always, Kyle, Jessie, and Kyle. I'm excited for today's podcast because we get to talk to one of the quietest, humble stars in the making, in my opinion. He's a bona fide winner, and he's definitely one that considers all things: when to go fishing, when to consider tech, and how to mesh both of them. So I'm excited to get his perspective on that. And he's hot off a third place finish at this year's Classic at Grand Lake. Almost won the dang thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a guy that obviously you and I have covered and even me fished against in college and seen his progression through the ranks and all the things he's been able to accomplish. And when you consider his age currently, I mean, he's still got so much time left that all the things he's been able to do to this point are just kind of a kickoff, really. And you're starting to see, obviously some of the big results coming through, obviously at the Bassmaster Classic, and really excited to talk to Cody. Obviously, one of our favorite guys to talk to just about fishing in general, just fishing talk. So should be a really good podcast.
Yeah, one thing that I noticed quickly is, there's a bunch of knuckleheads in the Bassmaster College Series, but rightfully so. You're going to have the kids that are 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, 22, 25, 27 in Tyler Rivette's case because he fished so long. No, I'm just kidding. But like, you'll have some knuckleheads in the College Series, but then you'll have some guys who are so well-mannered, and you're like, that guy holds himself and carries himself as a pro, and he's not quite made it to the pros yet. That's the immediate thing that I noticed with Cody Huff was how he was always well prepared when it was time to be covered or time to speak. It was always thoughtful. And he can also, have a good conversation and laugh with us as well. It's not all serious, but he's able to balance the funness of the sport, yet I'm going to speak above my age in terms of I've prepared for this moment. This is the skills that I have and the info that I know. And I'm going to be a little sneaky too with it because he's not always disclosed everything. But then when you get on the water and cover him, you're like, this guy knows more than he's letting on. He is wise beyond his years.
Yeah, there's no question. And as you were talking, I was just thinking in my mind, it's funny how much of, I mean, he's a stick regardless where we go. He's obviously well thought of anytime the Bassmaster Elite Series is going on. But, in the Northwest Arkansas, the South Missouri region, I mean, the amount
Hated,
of,
pure
I mean,
hatred.
oh, no question. I mean, he's like the one guy that you pull up to the ramp that morning and you're like, if this guy's fishing, like, I don't even know why. We're just donating at this point, and he is that good in that part of the country. Um, and to be able to see him progress, obviously through college, like we mentioned earlier, fishing different places, different bodies of water, going to school in Tennessee. Really just an interesting story all the way around, and he has certainly proven himself on the Bassmaster Elite Series so far.
Yeah, I think I don't want to get it wrong, but I believe one of his buddies from his hometown region, yeah, is Dakota Pierce. And Dakota went to Bethel as well. And I'm pretty sure they knew each other before Bethel, and then they went to Bethel, and then now since graduating, they're fishing back home. But it's one of those things where Dakota's by himself in a boat, and it's 5:45 takeoffs in 30 minutes, and Cody's pulling up from whatever road trip he's finishing up straight up to the ramp, hopping in the boat, and they're like, dang it, I thought they were going
Yeah.
to be at half strength today. Obviously, and then like we talked about the well-mannered aspect and professional. When Rick Clunn takes a liking to you for the way you handle yourself, carry yourself, and then he recognizes not only this is a good kid, but this kid has it when it comes to fishing, that's when you know that this is going to be a good guy in the making. And sometimes those best anglers, we always say, if you're good enough, you'll make it to the Elite Series one way or another. But it does take some of those guys that we thought, maybe a little bit longer, especially, and some people make it quickly, but it takes them longer to bloom. But right out of the gates, I mean, when he made it as he wins the college championship, then the next year they go and get top three and make the bracket, and then he wins the bracket to go to the Classic. So he won the college championship, didn't win the bracket. Then he goes, so I believe, yeah, he won the 2018 championship at 10 Killer. We went to uh, Serpent Lake. No, that was I think the year before. That was the year before with Fouts. Where did we do the bracket when Cody didn't win? They won 10 Killer, and then I think they had the bracket. I don't know where it was. And then the next year, obviously, the championship was Chickamauga, and I
Fouts?
believe
It was the year Fouts won.
Fouts and them won it at Bemidji, and then we went to Serpent Lake down the road for it. I'm trying to think of where the bracket was. Hank Weldon will have us dialed in. Oh, I think no, I'm so close to having it. I've got all the years around. I got Nick Ratliff's. No, that's right. Nick Ratliff won. They had it was at Milford. It was in Kansas. They went to 10 Killer, won the championship, went to Kansas. That was where Nolan Miner and West Virginia crew, and that was where
Showdown.
Campbellsville. Yes, and then that was when Nick Ratliff won, I believe. And then the next year it was Chickamauga, and then the Watts Bar was the bracket, and that's where Cody Huff went. So he won the championship next year, makes it to the bracket again, wins the bracket, and then he is at the 50th Classic in 2020. Sorry, I was like so close to like figuring it out. I had to see it through. Sorry for the people listening to the audio version. You could see me mentally processing on the video version of the podcast. But so he obviously bracket champion, classic angler in the 50th anniversary. That year, he later like qualified for the Elite Series, and then we picked him for a Rookie of the Year contender. He loses it, and Jay Shakurit wins Rookie of the Year, and Jay is fourth in the Classic, and he's third just a few years later. So these guys are well equipped. And I'm done. I'm out of breath. Let's just bring in Cody Huff and chat with him about his third place finish in the Classic and so much more. Kyle, we mentioned it. The guy, Cody Huff, third place in the most recent Bassmaster Classic just a few weeks ago, about to endure a 2-week stretch in Florida for the third and fourth Elite Series events of the year. Appreciate you joining us, and congrats on a top 3 finish. I know they don't hand out like silver medals or bronze medals, but a top 3 in the Classic pays more than fourth and fifth and sixth and 20th. So congrats.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's kind of a tough event, but it all worked out in my favor. Had a good tournament. Like you said, didn't win, but still an awesome week.
Kyle, I'm going to kick it to you. Let's just go ahead and dive into the Classic specifically, because that's the most fresh thing on our Forward Facing Sonar is fresh on our mind all times of the year, but for the Classic and tournaments, it's most fresh. How about you kick it off and walk us through the event, because you got to see Cody on day one.
Yeah, I thought that was the most interesting thing of the of day one. Obviously, Cody, you got off to a great start, and we find you on the map. It looks like you're in the far back of a creek, and I'm like, well, that's different. Like on the map, it's showing he's on land right now. Let's go check that out. And you catch 2 big ones, and you idle by me, and you remember what you said to me, in reference to what was going on.
I don't even remember.
So you idle past after catching two big ones in like a foot of water, and you say, you got to watch out for them scopers now. You got to watch out for them. And we just laughed because, obviously at that point, everybody on looking at Bass Tracks probably thinking, oh, he's found a school of them offshore and, doing this, that, and the other. But far from it. Like, walk through your pattern you had there on day one, going and kind of how you were able to translate that from like a White River lake. I mean, that's something that's really popular on those bodies of water. Just kind of walk us through your game plan heading into day one.
Yeah, as soon as I got to Grand, I had it on my mind that I wanted to be in front. I didn't want to be fishing for, the last few that were hanging out. I wanted to be in front of them because at that time it showed we had a really good warming trend coming. And it had been really warm for a few days there, like from the time we got there all the way through the first day of the tournament. I mean, we were having warm nights. It was just, it was your perfect springtime, like it was like one of those soft tosses where you knew somebody was going to hit it out the park and you just had to hope that you were that guy. And, day one, that's how it was. I was in an area that they were going to spawn in, and it seemed like just a big fresh school of females had swam in there, and it seemed like every piece of wood had a big one on it. And I really believe if it would have stayed like that, the fishing would have stayed that good, because I don't think I caught them all. I only caught 6. Um, and I didn't recycle through any of the water. I just went through it one time and, had a big bag, and I really, really thought it was lining up to be something real special.
So when you think, obviously I was on Bassmaster Live and we were saying that Cody Huff unofficially the first one to break 20 pounds in the Bassmaster Classic. Who's to think that he maybe is doing what Jay Shakurat's doing? Because Robbie Floyd had pulled up on Kenta Kimura and Jay Shakurat fishing a spot just as like the additional 11th camera out there. And he pulls up and Jay is catching him offshore. And we're like, Cody Huff's got a big bag in the next hour or two. He's probably catching him somewhere offshore. And so that was what we thought on Bass Live. And, but when you didn't really go through a bunch of fish, is that something that you were trying to manage and save it? Like if you realized or knew that it was going to be as cold and drastically changing on day 2, do you have any regrets about not going back there and just trying to make it a 25-pound day just because they did kind of disappear on you?
Yeah, I definitely probably should have. And Clunn's always been the one to tell me, don't leave anything out there. Like catch everything you can catch every day. But honestly, I didn't think that one cold night was going to affect them like it did. I thought that I could get 2 days out of them. Even if I had one cold night, I thought sometime, throughout the second day they would bite. And, we just didn't really have the conditions to make that happen. It didn't warm up fast enough. It stayed really cold for a long time. And, it dropped that water 10 degrees. But, you always wish you would have done something different. And, definitely think I probably could have caught a little bit more. Do I think I could have caught 25? I don't think so. I think I might have been able to get to 22, 23. But, in the grand scheme of things, looking back now, that wouldn't have made a big difference in my tournament anyway. So it's just one of those deals.
Well, ironically, Ronnie and I talked about it when we had Justin Hamner on the podcast a week ago, and we brought up your day 2. And to me, that was one of the things that maybe got overlooked with some of the other things that were going on. Is I got, obviously, like we talked about, I got a front row seat for it. That morning, it was really, really cold. It was really, really tough. Like a lot of those same areas, like you said, they just weren't there, weren't biting. And naturally, I'm, sitting there thinking like, dang, this really sucks because like the weather, like changing like it did is really going to drastically affect his tournament. But the rally you made later that day is what kept you in it. Like you could have easily just kept running that and doing what you'd been doing, and they may never have bit. Talk about your mindset, when you left that creek, knowing that, things were not going well, and you had to scrap that entirely and just run a completely different pattern. Like that was one of the more impressive things of the Classic that probably won't really get talked about much.
Yeah, man, that late day move for me it saved my whole tournament. I very easily could have not caught a bass and not made the day 3 cut, but I went into a different creek that kind of set up better for the new pattern that I was going to run. I wanted to fish, the last kind of deep stretches that were before those flats that I caught them off of the first day. And the creek I started in, it didn't really have a lot of good banks that set up right for that. So I relocated a little bit, and day 2, 11 o'clock, I have 0 bass. And that's not a place that the guy wants to see himself. But in the same breath, I knew what I was fishing for. I knew I was fishing for big ones. And, I knew if I was going to have to win, that was going to have to be part of my deal. I was going to have to get at least 1 or 2 doing what I was doing to have a shot at winning. So whenever I had to kind of bail on that, I started pitching a jig on the last channel banks in some of those creeks. And I went from 0 bass at 11 to, 14 pounds by 11:30. And man, I felt like I could just wipe the sweat off my forehead. I was able to finally relax and go fish. And I spent the rest of the day, I called one more time doing that. And then I kind of started running some new creeks, trying to catch them, dirt shallow again when that sun popped out. But they just weren't going to make that move back up there for me. And it's one of those deals. I don't regret what I did at all. And I'm glad I figured out that secondary deal to kind of save my tail.
Yeah, because we mentioned, obviously Justin Hamner had to catch fish. He had 15 pounds on the final day. He wins. If he would have had 0, he loses. But that day 2 was really when he won the Classic, having 22 on day 1. Or I think, 22. I think you had 21, right? Or just under, yeah. And so he had 22, and then he follows it up with 20. And no one else really sniffed that on day 2 other than Brandon Card, who came from, just 13 pounds way up there. And so that was the distance. And then day 3 was pretty equal for most people. A lot of people called that 15 to 18, but they needed 23. So that's the turning point of the tournament for sure, was for Hamner's plan to go well 2 days in a row to that extent. Tell us, when you were fishing those boat houses and those walkways, that's my favorite way to fish. It by far is those nooks and crannies. When you see cobwebs up under there, you just start salivating because nobody's been skipping under there or around there. And but man, those cables are not forgiving. And you had some close calls where it was like, maybe the Lord's gonna bless us today because I wasn't supposed to land that fish.
Yeah, no, that's how a lot I caught back in that stuff, man, because it was just, I mean, those, like, a lot of the places I was catching them, like, they were really old docks and the cables were just nasty. I mean, they were rusted and just, you could see the wires, hanging off of them. Every time your line touched them, it scuffed it. But man, I just started working with Sunline like 2 years ago, and I had never used any of their stuff. And they make a line called Shooter, and I started using it at Table Rock a couple of years ago, catching them like around the lifts and the chains, and I've never had a line that did not break like that. It'll scuff, it'll rub, it'll sound nasty, but it does not break. And I mean, I've never been around something that's that strong, to feel confident about getting them out of there. Because honestly, I don't second guess myself whenever I make that crazy flip anymore. You know what I mean? A lot of times you hook one, it touches that cable and it just busts. And do I lose some because of wrapping them up and stuff? Yeah, but I mean, very, very rarely, like probably 1% of the time, do I ever break one around that stuff. And it's just, it shows how important it is to have good equipment whenever you're fishing nasty, nasty stuff like that.
Well, that was the biggest lesson in the 2008 Classic for me. Like, there's always those moments of realization or understanding that pop through for you as a fishing fan. And in '08 at Hartwell, Charlie Hartley was pitching his jig into some places you don't consider, and he was like, "There's 2 steps to it. You can't catch that fish if you don't get your bait in there. And I just want to
Yeah.
get the bite, and I'll worry about getting it out after." And so that's one of the hand-to-hand combat that afternoon that you did, that Jay Shakurit did. It was very cool to see. And in the Classic, it seems like you can have a 4-day pattern for an Elite Series event, and it lasts the whole tournament, slight adjustments. In the Classic, I don't care if we have stable weather. It doesn't seem like you can find a pattern that will last 3 days. And there's always that doubt, and you need to do a complete 180. And your 2 patterns kind of seem that as shallow as you can get, and then as deep a banks as you can get, as far back as you can. And so it's
Yeah.
riding those patterns and making those decisions. You fished in a couple classics now. It seems like you have to be on point, not only with catching fish, but making that specific decision on when to zag, when to zag, if you're going to try to win a classic.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I mean, in bass fishing, just in general, the hardest thing out there is to trust yourself. You know what I mean? Just to make that choice, because it's so hard. I caught 21 pounds the first day of the Classic. I just want to do that again. So you just want to do the same thing that got you there. And I really feel like if you're going to win any event, it doesn't ever hardly work like that. It's all about making decisions on the fly. And if you're not confident in those decisions, it don't seem like they ever work out.
Cody, one thing I was going to ask, you hear guys that win the Classic always talk about, like Jason Christie talked about it a lot this last week, is that like when you win a Classic, it makes you want to win another one that much more. Like, coming as close as you did, like how much does that fuel the fire as a competitor to not only get back, but like give it another shot at winning?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just a different feeling when you're in the hunt to win any tournament. And I talked about it coming into this season with a lot of people that are close to me. And this is my 3rd year out here, and I've been so close so many times, but I haven't done it. And that's just how I want to fish this year. I mean, I want to fish with a purpose to win. I don't want to get points. I don't want to, of course I do, because I want to make the Classic, but I just feel like against these guys, if you fish like that conservatively, it just doesn't work. So I'm trying my best to change how I come into these tournaments. I don't want to just figure out how to get a bite. I want to figure out how to catch good ones. 1, and then 2, I want to figure out a couple different patterns that, just in case everything hits the fan, I'm not tunnel vision and can go figure out something else to have a chance to win too.
Let's talk about that winning mindset, because it seems like obviously we know it's stepping stones. You have college series, opens, elite series, and then the elite series anglers go to the classic, and it's even another level of pressure. But you won quite a bit at the college series. I can't probably list them all. I know specifically some of the Bass ones, but you and Garrett Enders winning, the college championship. You guys made the bracket that year. The next year you get top four and you make the bracket again. You win that one. And there's a lot of other successes in there for you. Going from, and that one year you won Toledo Bend with Dakota, I believe. And then you turn around the next week and win the Toyota Series event at Toledo as well, doing the same thing. So you have won before at many levels. And so did those wins for you come naturally? Like, not saying you were punching down on the competition like you're that much better than the college guys, but did it click quicker for you? Or was it like, I know so much more now than I did? It's just, so do the guys I'm fishing against. I can't be ahead of them nearly as easy as I was, in college.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's obviously, it's a different skill level for sure. You're fishing against a lot of, just the best in the world. And I think that was a big difference, as well as, you know, it sounds weird, but it seems like sometimes the less you know, the better you do. You know what I mean? Like, you just
In
roll with
fantasy
it.
fishing, no doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just seem like sometimes, it's easy to try to let your brain outsmart your gut. And, you know, sometimes it's just bad decisions. And sometimes it's just, I mean, whenever you win, it has to go perfect. And, just little things that just don't happen to win. There's always, it's just, it's one of those things. I don't know. I just don't feel like it's set up just perfect to have that chance yet. Like, every time that I've had an opportunity to win on the elites, there's been like the one guy out front that's got like a 6-pound lead. It's like going into the classic this week. It's like the one guy's got a 6-pound lead at Pickwick, Brandon Lester, 6 or 8-pound lead. We go to Champlain, Koya, 6 or 8-pound lead. Like, every time I get in second, I'm just like, I know you're in it, but you've got a lot of ground to make up. And it's one of those things that's so aggravating. It's like, you're so close, but I feel like the closest chance I had was at Champlain last year. Koya caught, a smaller bag than he had been the last day. And, I go out and I didn't catch a big bag. I only caught 20 and he did like 22, but I have trolling motor issues that day, or battery issues, and I'm out an hour and a half of fishing. It's just weird stuff like that happens. But, I feel like it's one of those deals. As long as you're staying in the game and you're having those opportunities, it's going to happen.
And you've had quite a bit of success. Sorry to interrupt, Kyle. I know you were about to jump in, but I wanted to pair off of that because he listed them. Grand Lake, just like home, to a certain extent, of Bull Shoals, Table Rock, that type of terrain and fishery. Pickwick, very similar to college at Kentucky Lake. You know those bodies of water well. Champlain, there's probably things that you did there that you do at Bull Shoals when they're out off the bank. So is this who Cody Huff is? That you're a chameleon to a lot of different types of bodies of water? And is it, for one, balancing your instincts and technology, or where you grew up and where you spent your learning years of college, that high school to through college time period of visiting these multiple types of lakes when you go home versus when you're at school? Is that where you picked up the chameleon, or is it the instinctual and forward facing, like being able to mesh those?
I definitely think it's a little bit of both, but I did, most of my learning whenever I was, you know, fishing at home, and then I'd be fishing in Tennessee, and on the Tennessee River, and getting to just experience a lot of different places. And you know, and then on top of that, when you start to learn, some of your forward facing sonar stuff, you learn different stuff. And I don't know, I really enjoy going to these different fisheries, but there's something to be said about being comfortable somewhere, doing something you know how to do, doing something you have all the confidence in the world doing, and just knowing you're doing the right thing to win.
Cody, it seems like we typically always bring this up to some degree. Obviously, Ronnie brought up forward facing sonar there, and it seems like an unavoidable topic at this point. But, he and I have had conversations about guys like yourself that grew up fishing, obviously without it, even though the masses will say, oh, certain guys are only good with forward facing sonar. Like, do you think that long term, like there will be people that are only using forward facing sonar, like that's all they grew up with, or like are the guys like yourself that grew up fishing without it and learning without it and now are understanding how to utilize it just like at that much more of an advantage? Like, do you think that we'll ever come to that, or like the learning curve will still be the same like the way you learned it?
I mean, I definitely think there's going to be a lot of guys that lean on it harder than others. And there's going to be times of the year where they do awesome. And we're going to go to the right lakes and they're going to smash them. And then there's going to be times when we go to other lakes where it simply does not work very good. And, you're going to see some of the other guys catch them. I definitely think a guy has to be good at both to make it work if they're going to do it for a living. But I think a lot of it is just based on the schedule. You know what I mean? It just, everybody's got their own little deal they're good at. And I feel like a lot of the guys that you see doing well right now are good at all of it. It's like you talked about Jessie. Is he a master with forward facing sonar? Absolutely. Did he go flip a jig behind some docks and catch some big ones in the Classic? Absolutely. I mean, it's just bass fishing anymore. And honestly, the whole subject of all of it is just, it's upsetting to see so many guys that I looked up to acting the way they're acting, whenever it's simply something, that is good and they just don't want to adjust, I actually had one of the guys that I have looked up to my whole life, like that's the guy, like that's the cool guy. That's somebody that I am like, I like the way they carry themselves, and I'm not going to say who it is, but they passed me on the street the day before the Classic and didn't have much to say, shook my hand, said, scope them up, and kept walking. All he had to say, scope them up. And they weren't fishing this Classic. And, I hate to see that out of somebody that feels like they've got to act that way because they're so bitter, over not fishing or whatever it is, just because the sport's changing, just is what it is.
I've said it on the podcast, I've said it on Bass Live, the same level of disappointment, and I hate that. I don't sit here smiling or something because it makes me happy someone's angry. That there's got to be I'll put it this way, and you can tell me if you agree with this or not, or if I'm off base, but I've thought about this a lot, and I've probably told Kyle this. I don't think every sport has something that retires their athletes. Quarterbacks get hit one too many times. They got to get out. Wide receivers are only good till they're 35. You got to get out. Next talent's coming in at 18 out of college. Basketball, once you hit 40, you better be LeBron James or you're not going to be able to hang at 40 and play in the league. Fishing hasn't had that. And your best friend and mentor, I hope it wasn't Rick that said that to you. No, he probably wouldn't have said that. But but you've got your closest confidant on the Elite Series that is in his 80 years old doing this, and we haven't had anything that's retired anglers. And if we're at this point in the sport and the thing that's going to make anglers retire, or the thing that's going to get them their performance low enough to be weeded out sooner, is technology, you hate to see it as a fishing fan, but you also know every single top level pro has had the opportunity to have that technology first and use it more. And so it's more of a shame that they didn't take it seriously. And so for me, it's just like, we haven't had anything in the sport that's retired anglers. And now it's getting to the point where you better be the best one trick pony if you're going to be it at flipping a jig or fishing topwater or chatterbait. You better be the best at it, because if you slip, the guys are going to have a lot of other options to beat you. And so that's just a bummer to see, but that's just a reality. Every sport has something that retires athletes.
It is. And unfortunately, these guys, they want to retire the technology, and I've got bad news for them. It ain't going to be technology retiring.
Well, we can stay on the subject, or we can get off
No,
of it.
I think that, well, why don't we talked about it just a minute ago about balancing instincts and forward facing. How have you seen that in your game change? Because you know it's probably a thing. When you see Justin Hamner, day one leader, you don't have to go pursue the info to figure out how he caught him. You can assume that he's doing something he likes, just like people could assume you were. But there are times where you're looking at fish on your screen, knowing you should be skipping boat docks or fishing a mud flat or going up the river and throwing a frog or something. And so have you missed out on weight because you've been staring at your graph? Or have you been able to balance that well and stick to what got you here, but what could take you farther too?
It just depends. But I mean, it's just like anything. If you love scoping, it is so easy to ride that horse too long, and then you can't catch up. I mean, it happens all the time. It's very easy. Like for me, like I've found myself wasting a lot of practice before just looking for that pattern, because if you can find it, you're gonna do very well. But I remember my first year on the Elite Series when we were at Palatka, and I spent a lot of my practice trying to figure out how to make that work. And I ended up being like the first guy out of a check because of it. If I would have just went fishing, that's probably an opportunity for me to get 1 or 2 more bites a day, and then all of a sudden, I'm in the check line on my first tournament instead of barely missing it. So I mean, it's just like anything. If you love doing it, it's easy to go spend too much. If you love frogging, you go frog for too long and ruin your whole tournament. I mean, it's just like anything else. It's easy to make a bad decision doing it. It's easy to make a bad decision not doing it. Obviously I was kind of on the front edge of learning how to use it in certain extents. Looking back now, obviously I wish I would have used the heck out of it a lot more. I would have made a lot more money if I just went to fishing with it.
Yeah. You were still busting them in the mouth on 2D and a little silver spoon.
Yeah, seriously. Like I mean, it made me feel like an idiot whenever you see, some of these guys just winning the heck out of stuff doing the same thing, but, shallower, and me just not doing it. But, I feel like part of the reason I wasn't doing it because I'd like to just fish too. You know what I mean? I was confident and comfortable doing these other, and I spent a lot of time looking for other stuff instead of that.
Well, can you go through for us your electronic setup? What do you run on your boat? Because we've seen some exorbitant setups. Me and Kyle are on the committee. The committee. When people says we're not doing anything about it, we are, actively having meetings discussing what we've seen, what we've heard, the stats that lay it out, and we do have a spreadsheet. I hope, Kyle, this is long enough in the podcast. All our peers have stopped listening by now, but we have a spreadsheet that has the amount of MSRP for everyone's electronics, because we did the survey the day before the Toledo started, and where it correlates to AOI positioning currently. So there are guys with very minimal in the top 10 or 20. There are guys with a bunch in the bottom 10 or 20. So where does your setup fall in that? Because it can be much overblown and too much of a distraction with your boat setups, and how do you use it in practice? Because we know there's stuff on the back people do, but some guys are just upfront guys.
Yeah, right now I've got 2 12s at the back, and I have 3 12s up front with 2 live scopes up front, and I have side scan and 2D on the back. I don't feel like I have a crazy setup compared to some of these guys, but I have more than enough. Like I could run one graph at the back and one graph up front and do the same amount of damage. So I mean, there's lots of talk about trying to limit stuff and trying to do this and trying to do that. And will it make a little bit of a difference? Yeah, sure, maybe it will. But I don't think it's going to make much of a difference in the guys that are winning and consistently cashing checks because of the technology, because they're going to be just as deadly with one as they are 2 or 3.
That's what my second part of that question was going to be. I was setting you up there, and see, you already hit the softball out of the park. What would your solution be to it? If there's the status quo, keep it as it is, which we know keeping it as it is could grow, and people are going to they're going to have breaks off the side of their boat, and they're going to no, it could grow more. Like there's more things that could be added every year. There's a limited, group, and then there's a full out ban of it. And a lot of fans have proposed ideas that I have deemed not good ideas, but some don't want it. Some want it only in practice, but you don't have it in the tournament. Some want you guys to only have it for 3 or 4 hours during the tournament day. Some want every other tournament to have it. Like we're just, I mean, my head hurts. So where do you feel? Keep it the same, or if you had to limit it, what would you suggest from your perspective?
It's easy for everybody to have ideas whenever they're not making a living doing it. Of course, they'd want to see it how they want to see it. But man, when it all boils down to it, we're trying to make a living. We're trying to feed our families, and we're going to do whatever we have to do legally possible to make that happen. And if there is one transducer that's going to help me catch more fish, you better believe I'm going to try to have it. And, if they wanted to limit it, just to say to make it where, I don't know, say a normal guy can look at it and be like, oh, I could never have that. That's fine. If you want to limit it to 2 transducers up front or 2 live scopes on the boat, whatever. That's fine. It's not going to make a big difference. But, all this talk about just in practice, just like you said, a few hours, that just doesn't make any sense to me. This is a technology. Like if you talk to Clunn about this, since forward facing sonar has become so popular, we have learned more about bass than anybody ever knew. And everybody just wants to act like it's not happening. They think that everybody's just floating in the middle of the lake catching bass. It's not like that. Like we're finding bass that we've never been able to catch because, these fish are suspended over a creek channel turn, or they're suspended over, timber in this creek ditch. That's actually where they'll winter. And, you'll find these big schools of fish that winter out there, and you find out how they live in the winter. And, you'll find them in places where, they're sliding up and down off the bank, or you find out how they actually behave. And that's just what blows my mind, is people want to make it sound so random and easy. And it's not like that. If you've ever used it, you know that you don't just randomly find bass. You have to be in the right area at the right time of year, and find where these bass are actually living. I mean, that's like saying to kill a big buck, you just go walk around in the middle of a field and he'll come walking by. It's not like that. They've got their own little hidey holes where they live and they feel safe. And it's just, it's a lot more difficult to find them than people act like it is.
And Kyle, we've talked about this. Literally like the mouth of housing at Toledo Bend, anglers were like hinting or saying, he's like, yeah, I'm fishing over 80 feet. And I'm like, that's crazy. He's like, and they're just swimming by me. Like I'm watching them swim by me heading towards the creek, and I can just follow them and know where they're going. And it's amazing to see the fish that were in the top 20 feet of the water column actively moving, and you could catch them. And then there's fish that are in the 25 to 35 down there just chilling, and how they position when they get up in groups to sun and move. And so we learned, just from you talking about Toledo and what I watched on Bass Live with guys having to find them. We used to just think, well, I guess they're just not here today. Maybe they'll show up at noon. No, those fish are in the back of the creek now, homie. They've been swimming all day and all night.
No, that's right. Like going into that tournament, I thought I was on them, but I was catching them way out in the river, like out past some alpha housing. And come tournament day, I catch 23 pounds in no time and just go on fishing. And come day 2, it's a ghost town. It's not like they're just on the bottom hugging it. Like you said, they're gone. Like they are migrating to spawn. They have a urge inside them that is making them swim because they have an urge inside them to spawn. And I mean, you gotta be able to go look for them.
You kind of hinted at it earlier, and the answer might be repeated in a lot of the things you said earlier. But like when you hear people talk about forward facing sonar, or read comments or whatever it may be, what do you think like the one biggest misconception is? Like, when you read this or when you hear somebody say this, you're like, that's just not accurate.
Well, like you hear a lot of guys talking about like just dangling it in front of them until you make them mad, give them the bite, or they chased one fish for however long. And that's the biggest load of junk I've ever heard. Like, if a bass is not in the mood to bite, you are not going to catch it. Like, I mean, it's just not going to happen. I mean, it's obviously it's not as easy as just dangling something in front of their face, because they swim all the time. It's not like they're stationary, just sitting there like, oh, drop a bait on my face. It doesn't work like that. And, honestly, I don't get into the comments and stuff anymore. I quit reading them. There's so many negative people in this world that think their opinion matters enough that they need to share it with everybody, that it blows my mind. Like, I don't even think my opinion's important enough to share with people about it, and I use it every day for a living. I don't know. It's just it's a crazy topic, and I don't know. The internet brings out the worst part of a lot of people.
Well, I'll bring up a couple of those comments, Kyle, since Cody stopped looking at them. Couldn't catch a cold in the middle of a doctor's office, or couldn't, he wouldn't be able to hit water if he fell out of the boat without forward facing. And then these kids and their Game Boys and their Xboxes. I'm just sorry to bust the bubble. Cody Huff can probably barely operate his phone. So he's not some video game player. Like, there's so many 19 to 26-year-old great fishermen that utilize tech, but they're wired like Hackney or wired like Heron. They know how to catch them. They know how to turn it on. They know how to move the gain up. They know how to bring the gain down. You're trying to send an email, got to call the wife in to figure out how to do an email, because it's just not their vibe. And so I don't know if you've seen that, but there are a ton of, not illiterate, I don't, that's not the right word, but like young guys that are not good at their phone or turning on an Xbox, but they know how to do their electronics because it's their job to figure out how to do that.
Dude, I'm wired to catch stuff, and I'm wired to kill stuff. That's how I live. That's what I do every day of the year. And if there's something that's going to help me be better at that, I'm going to use it. And if you are not smart enough to learn to use something that's going to help you and make your life easier, how are you, I don't know how you even live with yourself. Obviously, you're not happy with yourself if you don't have nothing better to do but make negative comments all day. Now I'm going to tell you guys something that Rick Clunn told me. Anytime somebody brings this up to him, he's not very happy all of a sudden. Just like flip of a switch, like he'll tell you, I think it is ridiculous people are acting like this. Because say you took all this forward facing sonar away from these pros. These pros don't need it. They need to be pros. They need to know how to catch them fishing. Well, whenever you take that from them and we go to these places and the winner catches 15 pounds a day and some local kids catching 27 and winning some local Tuesday nighter, all of a sudden we're not the best fishermen anymore. You'll never be able to say you're the best fisherman if you are not using everything in your power to catch the biggest bags that these lakes can put out.
Yep. And that's why, me and Kyle have talked about it. If we ban it from 100 elite pros and 225 opens pros or whatever, are we going to just start checking at boat ramps to see if you have a transducer for some random Joe on a Tuesday at Chickamauga? Like, if the rest of the public's going to have it, we're not really taking the pressure off these fish. There will be thousands of people who never enter a tournament that utilize it. And so unless it's a full-on outright ban and it's one of those, bring your guns to the station and we're going to collect them, bring your transducer to we just can't weed it out. You can't get rid of it. But, obviously people expect that if Bass makes that decision that everyone else will follow, states will follow, other tournaments will follow, but how we govern that is going to be difficult. I love it. I could do this all day, but I don't want to make Cody Huff mad at the podcast for talking it being disgruntled. So, let's transition. And I didn't expect to bring this up, but now that I'm thinking about it, this is the greatest thing we could talk about on this episode. Your hero and mentor and local legend in your town is about to fish his 500th B.A.S.S event when it comes to the St. Johns River in 2 elite events. How freaking cool is that? And that is one record that will never be touched.
No, that's right, man. When it comes to Clunn, he's so special to me that it's unbelievable. It's hard to put in words because, he's one of those guys, whenever he speaks, you need to listen because, whatever's coming out of his mouth is the truth. I got to spend some time with him this last week. We drove up to Clinton, Missouri, and went through the nitro plant. Just spent the day doing that. We had a ball. It's just he's a special guy, and I've got some weird feeling that putting Clunn on the St. Johns River where he's won plenty of times. It's just like it's one of those things that you're just like he might actually win. Like he may win again this week. 500 tournament on the St. Johns River. If he was going to win anywhere, my money's on him there.
I mean, talk about make the 30 for 30. It'll be a cat. We're already doing a cast episode on his 500th event, so we'll be following him. And I think every single elite pro is okay that we're gonna have a camera in his boat for every day that he's eligible to fish, whether he's in 37th after day 1, 12th after day 2. He's gonna have a camera, and I might even get somebody DQ'd just so he makes the final day if he's in 11th. You never know. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna do that.
No, that's awesome, man. I'm thankful that B.A.S.S has taken the time and given him the appreciation that he deserves because they're never going to see another guy like this in the sport. As long as we live, it's not going to happen. There's not going to be somebody that is as dedicated as this guy has been. I mean, he's literally gave his life to bass fishing, and that's unbelievable. There's so many guys right now that are 30, 40, 50 years old. They're like, oh, I'm done. A couple more years, I'm retiring. And that's fine. If that's what they want to do, that's fine. But, you hear Clunn all the time how thankful he is and has been for the chance to do this for his whole life. And it's pretty awesome that he's still got such an awesome attitude about it after doing it for this long.
I think that's the one thing that I at least just speaking from my own personal standpoint is like, we've been talking about the 50th season and 500th event for like so much this year that you almost kind of lose track of like 500, like it's hard to put in perspective. Like I said, I've heard it so much that like it just kind of goes in one ear and out the other because we're talking about like all these different plans of content and things of that nature. But when you just sit and think about it, it's like that seems impossible. Like those are like numbers that like you can't even fathom like that are real.
Kenta Kimura would have to fish all 9 opens and all 9 elites and the classic for 25 straight years to get to 500 events, because that's like you have to either fish 50 years and do 10 events a year, or you're going to have to do more events than anyone else does in a season and do it for like multiple generations. It's crazy. But and I know you could probably do a whole hour-long, 2-hour-long episode just about Clunn stories, but it's still crazy to me that he took a liking to some knuckleheaded kid that was going to go do college fishing, in the short future, and that's always very cool.
I've got the Clunn poster up here from this past week when we went to Trenton. I'm going to mark that out and put a 500 on it as soon.
That's awesome. I bought a shirt and I got a sticker and a trading card as well. So we're on the train.
Right. Oh man.
Was that available at the expo? Because if it was, I'm going to be mad that nobody snagged me one, considering I didn't get to go to the expo.
I don't think so. I think Bass Pro made them. They brought them for Rick to sign and stuff when we were at that walk through the plant and all that.
You might have to cross through the 499 or whatever, put 500. You might have to cross through the winds and put another one too. And I said, I don't want to be that guy, but I want to make him retire after his 500th if he wins it. Like, don't go fish 501. Keep it a clean number, end on a win. Like, that would be amazing. Walk away right then. But part of me also wants him to just make it to 525 or 530. Like just keep extending the record.
Yeah, no, I don't think he's got it in him to quit no matter what. I mean, that guy loves it more than anything, and I don't see him laying down bass fishing for anything.
Kyle, are you all good? You got anything else for Cody before we let him go?
So the last thing I did want to ask this, and I'm circling back to like 6 topics ago because it got brought up, and then we kind of moved on. But we've talked a lot about college fishing, and Ronnie and I, and Cody, I know you are too, are super passionate about college fishing and the projection that allows young anglers to take. I feel like you're like one of the poster child for that principle, like making it through the college series, learning so much about all these different lakes. Like it's a question you've probably been asked 1,000 times, but like how much of a difference and how much of an impact has college fishing and fishing, the entire series working your way up to the Elite Series meant to you? Like what's that impact been?
Honestly, without the college fishing, I wouldn't be here today. I know I wouldn't, because I wouldn't know anything. Just people don't realize how it opens your eyes getting to see all these different places that you've never been. And, I was lucky enough whenever I went to Bethel, it was a scholarship deal, and the school paid for our fuel, paid for our entry fees, and we just got to go fish. And at that point in my life, there was no way I could ever afford to do any of that. I just took out student loans and jumped in. And it's honestly, is it for everybody? No, of course it's not. College isn't for everybody. I don't really think college was for me. College fishing was, but college, you know,
Hey, you were
and
better off than some of those boys.
maybe not. I don't know. I'm just thankful that it worked out like it did, because I could have just as easily had a big student loan payment and no way to pay it off. But I was one of the lucky ones, and it worked out just right. And it's a lot of people think when they hear you went to school for college, or you went to college for fishing, that like you go there and you have people just teach you about fishing, and it's not like you have a fishing class. Like, it's not what it sounds like. It's just like
Gary and Kenny were schooling you up.
yeah, yeah. It's not like that. I mean, it's just like, when you go for baseball, then, you'll go to practice and stuff like that. It was more so, what helped me learn was getting to fish with 20 other guys that were from all different parts of the country. And, just getting to teach each other all these different things that a lot of us didn't know. Um, and just, sharing information. We went to these new lakes trying to all figure them out together. We had a lot of fun doing it. And I know, like I said at first, if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be here today.
I mean, that's one of those things that you've lived through that era. Like we're seeing Montevallo right now, where if you're going to have a Montevallo team in the top 5, you're going to have 2 Montevallo teams in the top 5. That's just the way it's going right now. The fact that Montevallo beat Montevallo in the college classic, while we were in Oklahoma for the classic, they weighed in and got first and second. Montevallo did. You guys had that same thing. If it was you and Garrett were doing well, it would be, or I guess, wait, who did you fished with Garrett. Who did?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and then it was John and Brian, and it was Tristan and
Don't
Dakota, and there's so many.
forget
Yeah,
about Cole Floyd.
yeah,
Boyd,
Cole and
yeah.
Carter.
Oh,
And it
man.
was. So what's that like living through that or competing where your biggest foes are your best friends because
Yeah.
y'all are so dialed in, it seems, because that's what Montevallo is. It's like you're not picking who's going to win which school, you're picking which team of that school is going to be the best. It's a crapshoot.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, it's one of those things that, people look back and think, how in the world did, that group of guys get recruited to be there at the same time? And it wasn't even like that. We all accidentally ended up there and all became better. And I mean, we had so much fun out there. I mean, we literally bass fished and hunted every afternoon after class, because we're all slack and we had our classes like 3 or 4 days a week and ended at noon. So we went fishing every day because we were right there close to the lake. And I mean, it was the time in my life that I can look back on and just think about how much fun we had. And, you look around now and see how many of them are doing it for a living, and it's a special deal.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. We didn't even mention KJ Queen in that earlier. So, that's just another guy. And he was actually the first one from Bethel to make the Elite Series. And now you've got John, yourself. Tristan's made the Classic a couple times, and it's just absolutely very cool to see that. Obviously, Will Davis is a part of that first group, before your time.
Yeah.
But Cody, I appreciate you, man. Congrats on the 3rd place finish. I know 40K doesn't sound like a $6 million payout, but 40K takes a lot of stress off of an angler for the rest of the season and helps you provide for your family, your wife and your little one. And it gets you down the road to go to Florida to hopefully make $100,000 payday or another 10K check.
That's exactly right. We're blessed to get to do what we do and chase these fish around. You can choose to be all involved in the negative of it, or you can choose to see how blessed we are and, just enjoy the time you get to spend on the water every day. And that's what I like to try to stay in and just have a positive mindset at it and just enjoy it.
Well, Kyle, I don't know if Cody's on the final day at the St. John's and so is Clunn. I don't know if he's going to lay up for him or not. It's not in his DNA, but that would be really hard to do. So we'll just let it play out and we'll see it happen in real life. But Cody,
Yeah.
appreciate you joining us, man, and we will good luck and be safe headed to the Harris chain.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Would you lay up, Kyle? If you're hero, I don't know who's your guy. Like, let's say who's your pro angler that you were like, is it Hackney? I mean, would you, or Christie? It's if they were fishing their 500th and they're in the top 5 with you, would you lay up to?
If I had never won one, I don't think I would. I think it's such a competitive sport in that regard. It's hard.
Sorry, Ike. Sorry, G man. You're gonna have to. I gotta spoil it if I can.
It maybe be one of those moments where, like, we had Scott Martin on the podcast a few weeks ago, and he mentioned like how happy he was to see Kyle Austin win, like at that moment. I probably would be in that like train of thought, but during the tournament, I don't think I could like cautious or I could like actually lay up. I don't think that would be in my DNA.
And we'll be honest, if Clunn got third or something and Cody won it, and that was Cody's first win with their relationship, it would be like if Hackney's, grandchild or little nephew was in the deal. It would be like Clunn won. If Cody won, that would be the second best result for Clunn. It would probably be the first result. Clunn's a competitor, but he is very humble.
It would be like the official like passing of the baton. Like I don't even know how to like. It's not like that's like obviously their relationship has been publicized plenty, but it would be like what a unique way for like him to win his first tournament is like his mentor and like the guy he looks up to so much, like 500th event. Like the storylines there are endless. I mean we can fantasize about it all day long, but there are 100 other guys that are trying to make sure that neither of those two win.
We will roll that feature about Clunn's son falling in the water near the boat dock and Cody pulling him out of the water, and that's when they became friends. Like we'll just run that feature like 400 times that day if it comes down to it. We'll just double box it and we'll just ship all the footage to the other 8 guys and say, sorry, we just showed these guys on live the whole time. No, but would be very, very cool. Man, what do you think? We always talk about it. I know how you probably think, but thoughts on Cody's conversation about forward facing sonar and the public perception of it, or the disappointment in an angler that he looked up to that said that, and the angler could have said that in the most encouraging way, but it is quite disrespectful to just box somebody in as just a scoper or something like that and say it in that fashion. You know what I'm saying? And so any takeaways from the his conversation on that topic?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously plenty of takeaways, mostly that I don't want to say on here, but I think the thing that's crazy, and this has been just kind of the overall reaction, and this has nothing to do with my standpoint on it or anything of the nature, but it's just crazy how like there's certain fans of the sport maybe or anglers obviously that are like treating it as if it's like illegal. Like if somebody was doing something that was
It's cheating. It's literally
right,
cheating.
right.
Yes,
Like
and it's not.
that's
Yeah.
that's the perception that I have a really hard time, understanding is that like it's not as if everybody doesn't have the opportunity to use the technology. Like it's not like, Sammy Sosa going to the plate with a corked bat. Like he's got something that nobody else has. Like this is something that, everybody has the opportunity to use. So to, degrade the guys that are good at it and have put in a lot of time and effort to be good at it, that's a little upsetting. And I kind of hate that for, the guys that are good at it and use it. I think that's unfair and that's a hard thing to wrap your head around is like it's not it just gets thrown around as such a negative thing, as if again like we were saying it's like breaking a rule. Well, it's not. Like everybody else has it as well. So that's one of the things that's just hard to kind of wrap my head around, and it is certainly disappointing to see some of those comments and things.
Yeah, because the fishing has been the sport where you look just like the guy who's winning a tournament, and you're like, oh, I can do that. I've never once looked at LeBron James and been like, I look like that, and I can do that, and I should be in the NBA. No, it's not the case. There's significant differences in height and build and athleticism that other sports that that's the barrier. But when you see people nowadays fishing at the top level, and you're like, I could do that if I had all the money in the world. Well, these guys didn't have all the money in the world. These guys finance their boats for whatever discount they don't get. They buy their electronics above and beyond what the companies are willing to give them. Maybe they get a couple units for product. Maybe they get paid because they are a top level pro. I don't have a home gym to go practice basketball because I'm not a pro. I like basketball, but I don't do it for a living. So not every single angler on the water should have what the pros have, and or have it held against the pros that they have it. It is a progression. Did I play basketball with holes in my shoes when I was a kid? 100%. Did I do it in a game? No. I put on the good shoes for the game. And did everyone work that level up? And so I did say this with Luke Duncan the other day, like, the only thing that concerns me isn't that the pros are using forward-facing sonar. It's that when you look at a high school kid's boat, a BFL angler's boat, an ABA angler's boat, an ABT angler's boat, Texas team, wherever you want to list, somebody who's not necessarily fishing for their job, and they've got like the rig is, you can't tell a difference between the rig and an Elite Series Pros rig, other than, like we took the carpet decals off and we just posted it. Could you tell the difference? That's the only thing for me. And it's not a slight against the pros. It's a slight against the people using it for the level that they're at, because it's not their job. It's like if I had the best computer set up at my house for me to just play video games on, when that's reserved for people who stream video games for a living, compete in tournaments, those things. So, that's the one part that is interesting about this. I mean, and I'll say there's a non-forward facing sonar tournament going on at Lanier this week, and I love Alan Brooks for Fish the Opens. I've covered him on the water once or twice, and good guy. And it probably was derived from a good plan, but I'll just call it what it is. Like, you put a tournament with no forward facing sonar, no electronics for the most part, on a lake that's great in April when they're on the bed. What are we proving by the winning weights? Or that Chris Johnson's really good no matter what way you want him to fish, that Brandon Pollock can catch him however he needs to catch him. So I don't know what we're trying to prove, if there is nothing to prove necessarily, but there's gonna be some takeaways from the public of, well, these guys don't need it then. Well, it's during the spawn. It's like if we held an electronics only tournament in December when the fish are suspended over 100 feet of water. So that's my 2 cents on it. There's got to be an in-between. There's got to be some way, shape, or form that will come to resolution on this. And so we're not trying to be the enemy, not at all. And that's just my takeaway of it. But it's hard to convince people of your thought process through 280 characters in a tweet or something,
Yeah, there's been plenty of Twitter fingers going around, and
YouTube fingers and Instagram
Whatever.
fingers. I'm just kidding. Hey, from me myself as well, because I'm a lover of the sport, Kyle. We watched Bass Live. Well, I didn't watch Bass Live because I was working when we started Bass Live, but I watched the Bassmaster shows. I'd check out YouTube anyways to check out content back in the day, but now we just have 8 hours a day of content compared to 45 minutes for a 4-day event in the past. So the things that weren't annoying to us back in the 45-minute TV show days we're seeing it 8 hours a day with more cameras on the water than we've ever had for 4 straight days. And then we see YouTube videos about it, social posts about it. It's just desensitizing, or it's really annoying. And so people get old with it quick, but that's just the social media era now. I've seen enough Angel Reese LSU women's basketball posts for me to not like her, and I've never met her and never watched it. Like, I just, it's just so much. So I can understand that from the fans. we host tournaments and we put out media. So
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, it's definitely made me realize in a lot more ways than I guess I would have thought that I'm more old school than I thought, just because like I'm just kind of like tired of seeing it, and it's like it bothers me the most when it takes away from like somebody's accomplishments, or takes away from like the beautiful things of the sport. Like
yes, Justin
Bassmaster
Hittner wins a
Classic.
classic for his family, and his dad's crying that, and we're like, well, he wouldn't have won it without forward facing. Homie, what are
It's
we
just
doing?
crazy, yeah. That aspect of it to me is wild. Like I don't really care to say a whole lot more about it, but like that kind of stuff is just
Yeah.
wild to me. Like it's the biggest celebration of the sport. It's the biggest event in the sport, and like the fact that people, will still go out of their way to say certain things, like it's a
It's a
lot.
bummer. It's a bummer. I mean, think about our 3 champs this year. An angler from Japan who has left his family and everything he knew to come to America to pursue a dream and has won at the highest level now twice. And then a 19-year-old kid who I'm about to post. By the time this podcast posts, it may have been posted or it's about to be. Trey's reaction that we didn't see on Bass Live, the last 20 minutes of the day, he catches the last big one, feels like he won the tournament, doesn't even think about the record, all-time record, but he's so close to that. And he has just straight 10 minutes of just processing his thoughts about, I am just blessed to be here. So you've got an angler from Japan sacrificing so much to come do this and try it. You've got a 19-year-old kid who has accomplished his dream, and instead of getting praised, he's getting heckled. And then you have a guy who's lived in a mobile home and mowed the grass at his favorite campus, decides to step away, has professors in the department say, we'll see him in 3 months because he's not going to make that dream happen. Now he's holding the Bassmaster Classic champ. And because he's not old enough, or he hasn't fished in 17 classics without winning one, or he hasn't won an Elite Series event yet, he's all of a sudden a nobody. And he wouldn't have won it otherwise. We're seeing a bunch of names. It's crazy. So, congratulations to all our champs. It is not easy to win, no matter what rules are in play. So that's the wrap of the podcast. Sorry for that, but if you are a fan and you're going to bring some hate in the comments, whatever. But we're just being real. From 2 young guys who love buzz baiting and chatterbaiting and don't even have electronics on the boat. I didn't even use my boat. Please buy my boat. Please buy my boat if you're online while listening.
If you're still listening at this point, please buy Ronnie's book.
Mint condition for the most part. And yeah, we just love the sport, man. We've loved it since it was a jig on mono and jig straight braid because we didn't know any better, to we got to have the right diameter fluorocarbon to get it done. So we love it all. Kyle, next episode we'll see you is the Harris chain preview and our fantasy picks.